Again, this meeting, due to ongoing surge of COVID coming after the holidays, as this winds down, this is via remote participation only because of a decision of the Board of Health. Public is welcome to participate via the technical tools provided. To join online via video, please use the Zoom link posted in the meeting agenda. To join via the Zoom app, you can also use the meeting ID 638-929-1060. There is also a dial-in number via phone through on the meeting agenda for this meeting. You can also view the meeting on Norton Cable Access Channel 15. In addition, please feel free to email questions for the board ahead of the meeting or even during the meeting to Paul DiGiuseppe, the town planner, whose email address is listed on the agenda and the town's website. And every effort is being made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Norton website audio, video recording, transcript, or other record of the proceedings as soon as possible thereafter. So with that out of the way, I'm going to start the meeting here in terms of our call to order. In terms of planning board business and policies, we don't have anything specific to address on that point. Or bills and warrants, I don't think we have anything there either. Approval of minutes, we do have 2 sets of minutes which were forwarded to members of the board prior to the meeting. We have meeting minutes from July the 27th and August the 10th. We will, if we can start with the July 27th minutes, that would be great. So does anybody have any specific comments related to the minutes of July the 27th, sorry.
I move we approve the minutes of July 27th.
Second.
Thank you, Wayne, for the motion and Alan for the second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to go through the roll. Wayne?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay. The minutes of the 27th are approved, and we still have meeting minutes from August the 10th. Wayne and Julie, you were both not in attendance for this meeting, so we have a smaller pool of people here. Are there any comments related to the meeting minutes of August the 10th?
Motion to approve minutes August 10th.
Thank you, Alan, for the motion. Steve or Kevin?
Oh, give me a second.
Yeah, Julie and Wayne were both out, so I was holding.
Actually looking to see if that was a meeting I missed, but I didn't. Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to go through the full roll. Wayne?
Abstain.
Julie?
Abstain.
Alan?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay, so approval of minutes. The next item on the agenda is an A&R endorsement number 12945, which is for 172 West Main Street. I know we have the files available. Paul, do you know if there's anybody from this application on the call at this moment?
I don't know if the property owner is on, but the engineer who worked on it could not make the meeting tonight.
Okay.
So he did say he was fine if you all just went ahead and looked at it and took action. If you'd like,
Okay.
I can share it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that, Paul? Sorry, we didn't hear that. Is that,
I think the person on the phone is just having problems with their volume.
yeah, if you're looking to speak, please, repeat that. Otherwise, we'd ask if you could please mute if you're not looking to speak. So again, this is 172 West Main Street, which is the right near the auto body shop, Norton Auto and Alignment Center, I think. Right, Paul?
Right.
And they're just
Right,
looking
you
to
can
carve
see-
up what is lot 1 and lot 2. So lot 1 is in the back, and it's at that.
Well, I believe,
Oh.
but yeah, I
Sorry,
believe that it actually,
it's splitting the auto body and the single family, or the 2-family and the garage, basically.
right. And I should say, the Mylar, which we have at the office, actually shows that the line here, where it looks like it's a dashed line, it's a solid line on the Mylar version.
All right. So it looks much clearer on the Mylar than on the PDF, is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
Okay. And this zone is what zone is this?
I believe this is village commercial. Let
I would
me,
assume, yeah.
let me take a quick look at that.
Okay. So if it's not, yeah, it looks like they're both about 20,000 foot lots in the change. Obviously, if we don't have the applicant here, do the members of the board have any questions for Paul other than mine, which has sent him scurrying down a rabbit hole?
I'm almost there.
Yeah, no worries.
Of course, this annoying habit when keeps the screen up over with the.
Okay.
It's village commercial. I can switch to show that.
You're already showing it, Paul.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah, we saw the whole process.
My clumsy process, trying to do it half blinded. Here we go. So that pinkish color is village commercial.
Okay. And then across the street is industrial.
Yes, that would be roughly where Valentine Tools is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. Any members of the board have any questions or comments that Paul's able to answer? Otherwise, we're just changing lot lines. So.
Chair, motion to endorse the A&R.
Second that.
Thank you, Julie, for the motion and Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll, starting with Wayne.
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Okay, so that motion to endorse is passed. And I'll add that to the list of things that need to be signed in the coming days. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the review of findings and conditions and execution decision for 0 South Washington Street, which was a decision made that we voted on our last meeting. As a reminder, the public hearing is closed. So this is just the board members reviewing conditions. So has everybody had a chance to review the draft decision that was sent out? And is there anything specific that we felt needed to be addressed. If nobody has anything further, then we would just move forward, and this would go to Alan as the clerk for signature.
I gave it a read, Tim, and didn't have any comments or questions.
Okay. I don't think we need to do an official vote of a further vote on this, since we've already kind of voted on it a couple of times here. But if nobody has anything further, Alan, this is ready for you.
I'm on.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is the surety and peer review release related to Fuller Drive and the Burt Farm subdivision. Paul, this is going a little bit in the Wayback Machine here. Do you want to give a little bit of context here in terms of what we're looking at? Since I know some members of the board have heard this before and some members have not.
Sure. So as you mentioned, this came to us in the fall of 2019, right before COVID, and there was a request by the applicant, Mr. Polilio, who's on the call, seeking the return of about $5,000 of surety and $400 and some remaining in a peer review account for the Burt Farm subdivision that was approved back in the 90s, and then it got extended into the 2000s. Originally, we had a surety of about $98,000 for him to construct Fuller Drive, and then we had a requirement back then that they had to install water lines along with a sprinkler system. That line was done before the city or the town ran the system, the main system down Burt. They've never connected. Anyway, we'll get into that in just a little bit. So about $5,000 was held back in about 2007 because there still were 2 or 3 lots that had not been constructed, and the town wanted to make sure that should there be any damage done to the curbs due to construction, that the money was set aside, that the town could complete the construction work if Mr. Polilio couldn't. We did verify in 2019, I guess the last lot was built. The highway superintendent confirmed that the road looked fine, and then Mr. Polilio came forward and asked that the remaining $5,000 be returned of the surety and the peer review. At that time, there were residents of Fuller Drive that brought to our attention that there was a hydrant that was installed back, early 2000s or so, which was never connected, and it was their desire to have that line connected. As you can see, Mr. Knopf is on the call, and I don't know if other folks are. We did send notices to every property owner on Fuller Drive about the meeting tonight. So where we've left off is I've reached out. So I had reached out 2 years ago to the water department and the fire department. The water department, their concern was, as this has been sitting idle or empty, the lines, for 20, 25 years, they're concerned about a few things. One, that if they connected, that the lines would not be capable of handling the pressure that would happen if they were connecting to the town system. When systems sit empty for all that period of time, the systems break down. They were also concerned about bacteria buildup, and there would be they had public health concerns with this. The fire department, I'd asked them specifically to talk about and provide you all with an email about what would happen in the event of a fire on Fuller Drive. And there is in both your email and then the public Dropbox for people to look and see what their response is. I mean, they certainly have capabilities, more than enough capabilities. If it's a small fire, that they could have multiple trucks down there to suppress it. There's a for a large event, fire event, there is a hydrant about 1,000 feet away, and they would essentially connect fire trucks by hoses to access it if they needed to. You can see from the fire department's email, they feel like they do have adequate capabilities of handling a fire in that area. So that's just catching you up to speed on this. I'm sure that the residents still have their concern about the hydrant, but that's where we're at currently.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
May I speak?
I'll get to you in just a second, if that's okay.
Certainly.
I do see your virtual hand up there. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I just wanted to start with Mr. Palillo. Do you have anything specific that you'd like to add in terms of the summary Paul's given, or? I apologize, you're muted, so I'm going to cut you off early before you get too far into that. Still muted. Let me see if...
Yeah, Dan, if you scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see...
Or next to your picture on the Zoom meeting.
We just lost video. Well, hopefully we can get him back at some point. But thank you for that context, Paul. While we wait for him to kind of rejoin a little bit here, Ms. Anderson, if you could just state your name and address for the record, and then please.
Yes. Ellen Anderson, 9 Fuller Drive.
Sure. And Ms. Palillo, we hear you. I'm just going to listen to Ms. Anderson first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, my husband and I purchased 9 Fuller Drive on January 7th of 2021. And we are near the very end of the cul-de-sac. But if you hang a right, our driveway is 225 yards long in. And so we are very far back from the Fuller Drive. And I wonder if, are you talking about a hydrant on Burt Street? Could that be connected up and then come down all the way Fuller Drive and then 225 yards up our driveway to our home?
Let me see. I don't have the specific location of the nearest hydrant in the documentation that we have from the fire department. But they're saying that essentially as long as they're able to get within, let's see, they would be able to get 1,000 feet would be from one fire hydrant to the engine, and then they would be able to connect a second one to that. So they would be able to get, call it 1,800 to 2,000 feet from that hydrant. So not just the 1,000, if I'm reading this documentation correctly.
Okay, and I don't have my calculator in front of me. So 1,800 to how many feet, I'm sorry?
2,000.
And what is the equivalent of that in yards?
Divide by 3. So we're going 660 something yards, I believe, in a straight line, not necessarily a curve.
Okay, so not a curve, because you'd have to hang a right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, there was a firebox on the edge of our property that has been removed. I know it didn't work, but so I truly don't believe that. I'm not sure exactly the location of the fire hydrant to which you refer. There is one across from 1 Fuller Drive. The last house as you leave the egress from Fuller. So, but are you talking about one on Burt Street?
I do not have the specific location of the fire hydrant marked on a map here. All what I have as the planning board chair is a note from the fire department saying they're comfortable with the level of access they have for the street.
And when was that was that communication in 2019?
That communication was last week,
Oh, it was last week. Okay, so
and
I
that,
can be assured that they can.
that they have looked at this recently and again. Yes. And Paul, the documentation from the fire department is available on a public Dropbox, correct?
It should be. I think we did put it up there. We can confirm after.
Okay.
Should have done it there.
Okay. Ms. Anderson, do you have any, do you know how to access that Dropbox or no?
Once I received this letter, I did go on and look at whatever the documentation is. I don't specifically recall seeing anything from the fire department. So I just want to publicly express my concern about where we are in a very unique, our home is in a very unique spot, far back from Fuller Drive. We're the furthest, property back. And there are
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there at the last sentence. If you would be able to just say your last sentence again.
The concern is that Fuller Drive has curves, and you are saying that the fire department said if there's no curves, but after 7 Fuller Drive, they would have to take a sharp right to the beginning of our driveway and then go down, and there's curves on our driveway.
Right.
So as a resident of Norton, I would hope that the fire department could come and help us in case of a fire.
Yes, I would.
And I don't feel that comfortable right now with the information that I have. So
I understand. I think what I was saying is that the fire department probably, when running a hose, would not be concerned about the curves of the driveway. They would just go straight up the lawn in the event of an emergency. And as I think, Paul, I think you tried to say at the beginning, that is what they would do in kind of a worst case scenario. In a small fire in a kitchen or a bedroom, they would be able to do whatever they needed to with that, with just the truck going right up the driveway, essentially, with the amount of water they store. Correct? That's what
Correct.
Deputy Chief Robbins said.
Right.
Okay. So in terms of Ms. Anderson, if you Paul, who's the town planner, his email address is on the agenda for the meeting. And if you aren't able to access that note from the fire department, you could send him a note and he can make sure that you have the link to the right place.
Oh, are you? I'm sorry. Sir, are you saying that are you asking that I send a note to the town planner? Is that what you're saying?
Just to make sure you can access the email if you'd like to from the fire chief.
Okay, and that's Mr. Giuseppe?
D. Giuseppe, yeah. His email address should be on the agenda and on the town's website, rather than spelling it.
Okay.
And I just looked in the app, the file is there.
Okay.
So things were added later after you would have received the notice. There were some documents that we were still trying to get. So.
So I did not see those. Yeah.
Yeah, you might. It's possible you looked earlier. We were just trying to get. I was just trying to get the latest information out to the board and to the public from the water department and the fire department.
Yes, I looked. I looked at whatever was on there. There were, I think, 2 emails on there. As soon as I received the notice, but I have not. I never went back on and to see if there was anything else, or never, was told that there was any other information. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, I think that. Yeah. So you can look at that, and then if I would connect, I think that the next question in that vein would just be to connect directly with the fire department in that respect. And
Are you, I'm
Mr.
sorry, sir. Go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Oh, are you telling me, sir, to look at that after you vote? Yes, yay or nay on this?
I think what I'm saying is there's probably nothing that I can say as a member of the planning board that, at least in my opinion, would kind of overrule what I think the fire chief is saying about how he would fight a fire. So that's, I think, my feeling about it. But
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Mr. Polilio.
Can I give you my little spiel?
Sure, please go ahead.
Well, just
And,
the
and
relevant.
Mr. McCusker, I do see you here as well with your virtual hand raised.
The reason being is the reason for the $5,000 bond was strictly for the curbing. I mean, the issues with the water were resolved many years ago between the planning board and the water department. When I posted the $5,000 bond, I have a letter here saying the reason for holding the $5,000 is that several lots remain to be developed, and we anticipate during construction of the homes that these will have some incidental damage to the curbing. The $5,000 will be held to repair any damage to the curbing or roadway during construction. The Public Works Department head is certified that there is no damage more to the curbing. It's all set. I think that's the only relevant thing. And the revolving fund from McGuire to pay for the inspections, that's obviously not needed anymore. So I'd like that released also.
I understand, Mr. Polilio. Thank you for your context. I think that as a...
And this letter, I'm pretty sure Paul has this letter. Probably.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Yeah, I think I understand your feelings. I also feel it's kind of my job as the chair of a town board to, if there are members of the public who want to speak and ask questions about something, that I'm just going
Absolutely.
to
I
listen.
just wanted to, give you my side.
Yep, no, I understand. Mr. McCusker, I see you have your virtual hand raised here as well. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record here, and then if you have anything you'd like to ask or comment.
Hi, James McCusker, 2 Fuller Drive. So I've been aware that these fire hydrants on Fuller Drive haven't been operational for 15 years since I moved into town. And I have called the water department, I have called the fire department to find out, because it was unclear. They were painted, the one in front of my property, which is the one at the end of Fuller Drive, was kind of half red, half black. It was, it wasn't marked as not operational. So by all, just by a cursory view, one would think you have an operating hydrant standing there. And I was told by the water department that they couldn't do it because the water supply in town, blah, 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 we can't connect it. I was then told by the fire department that they wanted it connected, and it's a state law that when they were building this development, the state law required the installation of fire hydrants. And that's why the fire hydrants were put there. But then the town and the planning board circumvented state law, and they put the fire hydrants in the ground but didn't connect them. So how is it possible that the state law can demand that the town insist on fire hydrants being in those locations, but then the town can just circumvent that by not having those fire hydrants connected?
Thank you for your comments there. I can't speak to what state law was when this development was put in.
What state law now?
That would be something that we would have to refer to town council in terms of that. but this development would not be affected by what state law is now. It would be affected by what the law was when it was put in. So that's not necessarily, it wouldn't kind of the quote unquote
Right, but if
grandfather
it
idea.
was state law in the
So-
90s, then the town should do whatever is required to make those fire hydrants be operational. And whether or not the town allows the other residents to connect to town supply water or not, I don't know. But if the law requires those fire hydrants to be operational, for 15 years they haven't been, and the town has been ignoring this. And just this past year, the public works sent somebody out to like spray paint the fire hydrant, and the guy was out there spray painting the fire hydrant red. And I was like, whoa. If you spray paint it red, does that mean this is operational? And he's like, I don't know. So your own DPW didn't know that this hydrant in front of my house wasn't operational. He had to call. They had to figure it out. I said, why don't we open it and see if it's operational? They opened it, nothing came out. So then they spray painted it black to indicate that it's a dead hydrant. So at least now they're spray painted properly, so that, you know, in the event of an emergency, the fire department can know that it's dead, as opposed to them being spray painted red and people thinking they work and then finding out that there's no water coming out. The one hydrant that the fire department was saying was operational is the one that is on Burt Street. It is in front of 1 Fuller Drive. Okay, so it's 30 yards maybe from the corner. So it's already traveling 30 yards just to come onto Burt Street and then go down Burt Street. I mean, I trust the fire department will find a way to fight a fire in the event of an emergency, but I just have a problem with the idea that the town would put fire hydrants in the ground and then have them not operational. It just makes no the logic of it just has boggled my mind for 15 years.
I understand, and I feel that in your position, I would feel similarly boggled.
Can we get an answer to whether or not the state requires those to be, or required at the time for those to be operational before we release this surety? Can we, I mean, I understand the developer says that there was one issue and that this was settled by the planning board back in the 90s. But I mean, if the planning board ignored state law back in the 90s, that doesn't make it right.
I would generally agree with you there. That is something that the board needs to evaluate as we decide on this. Obviously, the $5,000 in the surety account would not cover anywhere near what it would cost to hook a fire hydrant up in any respect. I generally have to kind of start from there, A, and B, my understanding is that the law was that the fire hydrants needed to be put in the ground. It did not say they needed to be installed. Does that make logical sense? Maybe not. But that is my understanding of how we got here. What happened in the past is one thing. What we have, and at this point, the board has to deal with what we have in front of us.
So as a citizen, how do we get the town to make these things operational? I mean, if the law was circumvented either because there was a flaw in the law or maybe I don't know that there was a flaw in the law. I mean, if the law says we have to have fire hydrants, but it doesn't say we have to have operational fire hydrants, I mean,
I agree with your expression. Yes.
And if there's a cost, there's a cost, but the town, circumvented this cost 30 years ago. The town needs to step up and make it right and just get those things operational. And the fire department, I mean, over 15 years, I've made multiple calls to the Department of Public Works and the fire department. Every time they throw up their hands and go, I don't know. And at the Public Works and at the fire department, they go, yeah, we'd like them to get operational fire hydrants. So, I don't know what they're putting in this letter. It's a cover your ass letter or not. But when you ask if a firefighter whether he'd rather have a fire hydrant nearby or 1,000 feet away, I think he'd say nearby.
I'm sure they'd rather have it nearby. Yes, I would agree.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
In terms of a specific remedy, or approach, I'm not sure if I can give you a silver bullet there. If you came up and put something in front of town meeting saying that you wanted to make sure that this hydrant was connected and that the town needed to go forward and figure out how to do that, I'm sure you'd have a lot of people probably saying that makes sense. So I'm just gonna, they have one other additional person who has their hand up. So I'm going to try and get to them if that's all right. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Is it Mr. Knopp?
Yes, it is. Ken Knopf,
How are
5
you
Fuller
doing,
Drive.
sir?
Doing well. Thank you for holding this session this evening. Just further to what Mrs. Anderson and Mr. McCusker said, and comments that have already been made, I don't believe the residents on Fuller Drive are comfortable with the answer that's been provided tonight. The developer did their job by installing piping for fire hydrants. We as residents on the street have no idea why the fire hydrants aren't working other than something between the testing of the pipes. For 15 years, as Mr. McCusker said, we don't have working fire hydrants. As Mrs. Anderson said, her home is over 1,000 feet from the closest fire hydrant. God forbid there is a fire in the woods in a lot of the homes, in the backyards of many homes. We are going to have a very serious problem on this street without working fire hydrants. Yes, the fire department can lay down their equipment and their hoses, but how long is that going to take? I don't know. They probably don't know. So yeah, we don't want to find out. So as I've asked Paul before, we need some assistance from the fire department and the water department. Why can't the piping be tested? Just because they're old, that's not acceptable in my eyes. The piping should be tested to get an idea. Someone mentioned bacteria as a reason why they can't be tested. This isn't our own water supply. This is just put out fires. So bacteria should have nothing to do with working fire hydrants. It just should not even be a factor. So again, I'm reaching out to the planning board to protect us as residents. God forbid there is a fire, even in the bogs. If there's a fire in the bogs and it spreads to the woods on Fuller Drive, we're in trouble. And also, the homes on Fuller Drive provide a lot of tax revenue to this town, and the town should protect the value of the homes of the residents on Fuller Drive. So I appreciate anything the planning board could do to, step one, try testing the pipes out and see where we are. And I think the developer may be able to shed some light on the interactions between installing the water for the fire hydrants and the town testing. I think Mr. Palulio probably knows best what happened between everything. So I thank you for your time.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you, Mr. Knopp. Yes, Alan.
I just want to bring one point there. The domestic hot water supply and a fire hydrant supply is the same water line. They are not separate. They do share the same piping throughout the whole town. They are not separate supplies.
We're on well water.
I understand you were saying about the bacteria and whatever. Domestic hot water and sprinklers to buildings or fire hydrants, it is all the same water lines.
And because Norton's a closed loop system, you can't introduce anything that's not
Almost every
kosher,
town,
essentially.
almost every town's the same way. Every town shares. It's not separate lines for sprinkler systems, fire suppression, and hydrants. It's all the same.
Oh, this is Ellen Anderson again. I'm sorry. I just want to add to what Mr. Knopf was trying to say, that we are all on well water, so we are not connected up to the town of Norton's water system.
Thank you.
I think what the concern is that there's bacteria in the line and it's opened up to the town line, and the bacteria possibly could get into the rest of the water supply.
Yeah, that is
That
my
makes
understanding
sense.
as well, Mr. Polilio. Thank you. Obviously, I have a hard enough time remembering what I had for breakfast this morning. But if you have any recollection or care to share anything about the discussion around the hydrants at the time they were installed, you can feel free to do so. Or if you're not, or if you would need to consult something further, that's your prerogative.
All I was told was that the water department was not allowing any more connections. We had waited a year to put it in, put the road in. We couldn't, we went to the board. They gave us permission to put the road in with the water mains installed but dry. That's all I know. I don't know what the interaction was between the planning board and the water department was at the time. It had nothing to do with me. So I don't really know why it was done, but that's the decision that was made.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Polilio. Okay. So I think we've heard from Mr. Polilio. We've heard from a number of residents on Fuller Drive. Obviously, we would love that this all be tied up in a neat bow, but I'm not sure if that's something that we have the opportunity to do here. Say members of the board want to add anything further to the discussion here related to the release of surety, as well as anything further that in terms of guidance that we might be able to give the residents of Fuller Drive in this matter.
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin. So I think here, obviously, the residents have very reasonable concern, but with this request by the Mr. Polillo, we have to stay focused on what our role is here, and I think the residents would be far better served if they met with the Water and Sewer Commission. They're elected officials as well, and they would have direct authority over connecting to the fire hydrant. I think, if we did not approve release of the surety, does that have any direct impact on getting the hydrant connected? And my feeling is no, otherwise it probably would have been done by now. So you just have to, be focused on what we have in front of us as far as the vote tonight.
Julie, I see your mute clicking
No,
on
sorry.
and off.
I was like, my mouse pad is a little sensitive. I tend to agree with Kevin. I think this is a little outside our purview with the hookup of the hydrants, knowing that they're there. I think there's a good discussion that's taken place, and I think we're very, well educated now, kind of, at least what people can remember that happened in the past. But Paul, I don't know if there's a way for us to recommend that the Water and Sewer Commission at least, maybe discuss this or something like that. I don't know even know if that's within our purview or quote unquote powers. But I agree with Kevin that they oversee, this topic and have much more jurisdiction over it than we do. So I would love to see, something along those lines take place if that's, even an option, but definitely, support Kevin and his words there. And it's hard when the surety is also quite a minimal amount at this point. I'm not quite sure what we could even do if we hung on to that, to be, honest. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah. Paul, if there is a connection to be made with the water and sewer department, that I think might be helpful if that connection hasn't already been made. I know some of the residents have said that they hadn't made too much progress going that way before, but
Right now, I would just add to what Kevin and Julie are saying is that for the residents of Fuller Drive is to reach out and ask to be placed on a Water and Sewer Commission agenda. The commissioners are aware of this. The water superintendent did copy them on emails, so they do know about it. Now, I would just recommend that they go to that Water and Sewer Commission and ask to be placed on the agenda.
I have one more comment. I'm sorry, this is Ellen Anderson, 9 Fuller Drive.
please. And then I
Yes,
see
and-
Mr. McCusker with his hand up again. So.
Yes, and so if the town of Norton would be kind enough, eventually, I know it's not in your purview to be responsible for the town not placing fire hydrants properly on our road within the town. But if there was any damage to the curbsides, then who would be responsible for that? And I don't mean to punish Mr. Polilio, but that's my question. Thank you.
In terms of if the hydrants were hooked up again in the future?
Yes, they hooked up hydrants and they broke the curbing. Doing so.
I would assume that at this point that would be considered an entirely new project. And if that was something the town undertook, then they would have to shoulder that burden.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Chair,
McCusker, did you have anything further that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, so again, as I stated before, when I called the water department, they say, oh, we can't do anything about it. Talk for fire department. The fire department says they can't do anything about it. Now the planning board back in the 90s had the power to approve the road without having the fire hydrants connected. But now the planning department in the 2020s doesn't have the power to get those things connected. I mean, it's a pass the buck here. And again, if this department had the power 30 years ago, why doesn't it have the power now? It's kind of, it doesn't make any sense. And again, you're saying, oh, well, put it on town. The town isn't going to vote to connect fire hydrants and pay $50,000 or $100,000 or however much it costs to connect those fire hydrants for 9 houses. The town, getting the town to approve anything is impossible at town meeting. It's the town. I'm assuming none of you members were members back in the 90s, but if the planning board, erroneously approved this street without live fire hydrants, that's on the town, and the town needs to step up. And the planning board, which was a responsible agency 30 years ago, should be the responsible agency now. I mean, getting the town to accomplish these things, I find it's just a matter of a pass the buck. And so now I have a planning board in front of me. You have a surety of $5,000 for the road to be completed. That $5,000 should be enough, as Mr. Knopf said, to test to see if the pipes are structurally sound or free of bacteria. I mean, I understand that it's all one system, and that's fine, and you don't want to introduce bacteria, but there's where there's a will, there's a way, and it just doesn't seem like there's a will.
So,
and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. McCusker, I'll say I understand your frustration, but I do resent the assertion that this is a pass the buck on our part. It's the planning board's job to approve roads or recommend roads to be accepted as public ways, which are then accepted at town meeting. So that is part of what the planning board's role is. Was there a mistake made 30 years ago? Certainly possible. Redressing that mistake is not something that we really have any sway over as a planning board. The Water and Sewer Commission, not necessarily the Water Department, The Water and Sewer Commission, again, would be the elected body overseeing this. And as Paul has said, I would recommend that you look to get on their agenda. Those are also public meetings. Invite as many people as you want to that meeting and be as vocal as possible. That would be my recommendation, and what I would try to do if I were in your shoes.
Can I ask the planning board to see if the law was violated back in the 90s, or should I investigate that myself? I mean, can the planning board take that on? You said you could talk to the town lawyer.
We can certainly look at that, but that's something that the board can either consider in their decision this evening or put that on for a future review. So that may or may not be something that we tie to the release of this surety. So.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important to point out that we approve plans, right? We approve plan developments and structural plans and that kind of thing. And if they fit within the zone and our requirements, then sometimes they bypass the planning board and go directly to the appropriate town departments, the building commissioner, building inspector, highway department. And in this case, we don't go back after a project is completed to see where the fire hydrants are and see if they're installed. That's up to the departments of the town, the building inspector and the water department and the fire department. The only reason we're talking about this today on the agenda is because the planning board back then in the 90s requested a surety that we held it to make sure that the road, when they were all complete, was not damaged, the roadway or the curbing. So if that surety wasn't put in place, the planning board wouldn't have any, it wouldn't even be on our agenda tonight. So just wanted to point that out.
Ellen Anderson, I have another comment.
Yes, please go ahead, and then
yes,
we'll
Ellen.
Try and yeah.
Okay. Yes. I don't know the gentleman's name who just spoke. What is his name?
The member of the board. That's Mr. O'Neill. Yes.
Oh, O'Neill. Does he have a first name?
Kevin.
Is it Paul, Steve, Kevin, Alan, Wayne? I see 5
names. Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin O'Neill. Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking, I know that you represent the town of Norton, of which I am now a resident, and talking about people or entities bypassing and going to other, boards or commissions in the town, which should not be allowed, to prevent what is crucial, which is the safety of the residents. So I feel a little bit offended at that. But anyway, I guess this is where we are right now.
I don't believe that the use of the word was intended to mean that it was taking away around proper procedure. I think the implication was just that when something relates to fire or building safety or something like that, that's a matter that is reviewed by the fire department, the building inspector appropriately.
Right, but here we are in 2022 with no fire hydrants.
I have no answer for you in that respect. As I have said a few times, I think we need to, as I think a couple of members of the board have said, we need to act with what's in front of us at this moment, and move forward as best we can. The appropriate party for any residents related to this in terms of getting the hydrant hooked up is to get on the Water and Sewer Commission agenda.
I mean, again, if state law indicated back in the 90s that fire hydrants were required, would not fire hydrants being active be considered part of a complete road?
At this point, the road has been accepted by the town, and we can't undo that in this meeting.
Okay, so the road was accepted, whether or not it was legally accepted, it was accepted, so that's water under the bridge.
We can't do anything at this moment in time at this.
This
in
is
this
not about
forum.
accepting the town. This is about something. I mean, I don't understand why there's a surety if the road was already accepted. You know, because if the road, if the road, I mean, again, if the state law requires that fire hydrants be active, and they're not, then the road really doesn't comply with state law. So we should not have accepted it, and so the surety should be there till it's legal. And if it's not legal, I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but the point is you're saying your sole purpose is to release the surety when the road is complete. And if the fire hydrants aren't working, in my opinion, the road is not complete.
I understand your opinion, your feelings, Mr. McCusker.
Yeah,
I'll just
and
try
I think my
and say
opinion
that.
agrees with state law. So,
Okay.
So the town could have a lawsuit. Like if there was a fire at one of these houses and it was a complete loss, the town could be liable. It wouldn't be the resident coming after the town. It would be the insurance company coming after the town.
That is certainly something for the town to evaluate. Yes.
Yeah.
And just to restate, as the applicant and the town planner has said, at the time the surety was placed, it was to can be kept in reserve in the case that damage was made during the curb cuts for the last few lots on the street. So that is what we have in front of us. Do any members of the board have any other further comments they'd like to make at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would, on behalf of the residents, and believe me, I didn't mean to be disrespectful, Mrs. Anderson. I completely concur with your concerns, and if I lived in the neighborhood, I would exactly feel the same way. And this is what I would do if I was one of you, is I would get on, as the chair mentioned, get on the Water and Sewer Commission's agenda. They're elected board, they're required to accept all requests and then express your concerns to them. They're the authority that can basically make something happen and connect to the fire hydrant. This surety, with this developer from the 90s, it's almost, and please don't take any I don't mean to say this the wrong way, but it's kind of unrelated at this point, since all this time has passed. But I would go to the Water and Sewer Commission. I would appeal to them. I would also petition for a residence article for the town meeting, the annual town meeting to come up in I think it's May or June, and ask that funding be allocated through the town budget to make that connection into your fire hydrant. So I don't know what it's going to cost. The Water and Sewer Commission should be able to give you an estimate. But if you petition through an article to be placed before the town meeting, then it goes in front of the town meeting and they vote. And I'm sure that the majority of residents in town would side with you. I can't speak with full confidence, but if anybody puts themselves in your position, they would agree with your request. So that's how I would go about it if I lived in your neighborhood. And I think it's been many years. I think if you follow that path over the next few months, hopefully you'll be successful in getting this put behind us.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that was a good summary. Do any members of the board have anything further, or do you want to take an action on this agenda item?
Mr. Chairman, I was also going to say, if there's a letter generated going to the Water Sewer Commission, it cannot hurt to copy the select board on it and also the town manager, so everyone's on the same page. And also maybe bringing it up to a select board for an agenda item isn't a horrible idea either.
Thank you.
I would make a motion to release the surety for a full drive.
I'll second.
Thank you, Alan, for the motion and Steve for the second. there any further discussion?
I just wanted to add, I agree with Kevin. He actually took the words out of my mouth. And I also agree with the concern with the fire hydrant. If it was anything that was in our purview and we could do anything about, I'd be the first one making a motion to get this handled. So that's.
Thank you, Steve. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll go through the members for a vote. Wayne,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Okay. Paul, I don't know what administrative steps are required for this process, but
Can I also ask, there was also a request to release the remaining peer review funds as well.
okay.
And then what happens from here is upon a positive vote, I'll issue, tomorrow or Thursday, a letter to the treasurer to initiate the release of those funds.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll amend my
I-
motion to include the peer review funds.
My second
Okay.
still stands.
Okay. And we're going to need to go through the whole roll again. So let's do that. Wayne,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Okay. Paul, thank you for the catch on that. Okay. The next item on our agenda is related to Springtown meeting. We have some notes on proposed bylaw changes from our subcommittee. And then we have an MBTA related item, but we'll start with the subcommittee here. I'm not sure if there's somebody who's driving here, but please go ahead.
I'm always fine turning it over to Julie or Alan.
All right, I'll give a quick overview. So we had kind of our subcommittee on these few proposed changes. I don't know if you want to tackle them one at a time, Paul. If you want to put them up, we can talk through them. So
Sure.
Myself, Alan, and a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals met with Brian and Paul to go over some proposed changes that we'd like to present for town meeting. They are not, I would say, substantial by any means, but more of a cleanup of sorts to say. So the first one that Paul put up is really kind of looking at adding a few definitions and principal uses to the zoning use matrix. Paul, these are pretty standard in nature definitions. We really, didn't have any real comment or concern with these general definitions as presented. And then these relate obviously to the additions on the table below, and looking at what zones we obviously allow by right, not allow, or by special permit.
Okay.
And then Paul, I think that one of the ones in blue was for the life sciences, right? I don't know if you want to touch on that one.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're trying to do is, just adding to what Julie stated, was we're trying to implement a recommendation in the master plan, as well as actually the local rapid recovery plan we did for West Main Street, to update the use table to identify missing uses, uses, and in this case, uses that we're trying to make sure we're clear that they're allowed and where they're allowed. So Julie mentioned what's in blue. There are a few categories tying back to life sciences, like pharmaceutical companies, that the existing bylaw really doesn't call out, and contemporary bylaws do in other communities will specify uses, particularly ones that they are trying to attract. The ones that you see in gray are actually just missing their standard things to add in any bylaw, but we don't have it, like medical, dental offices, computer programming and software services. They were just omissions in the use table, and we just wanted to add those. And the other thing I just want to mention too is we really tried to mirror where they're allowed and how they're allowed to related existing uses. So, for example, with medical, dental offices, it really dovetails with administrative offices in terms of it's allowed in, it's a yes in all 4 of the commercial and industrial zoning districts. So, Julie, do you want me to continue? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, good. I mean, you can kind of keep scrolling down, but I think, Paul's right. It's just kind of cleaning up the table, adding uses that, either Paul or, the building inspector has been like, oh, someone comes and asks us and we can't find it anywhere. So it really is, I think as simple as that, of trying to just strengthen the use table and ensure we've got some things that are missing, but also I think open up some things in the life sciences. And then these few that are in yellow were ones we talked about, especially kind of in relation to the village commercial core and some, people who have approached the town that have some ideas in some of these areas to ensure that, we're also looking, at some of that, maybe town center-esque things that we might want to see in those districts, and then obviously commercial and industrial as well. So that's where the 2 artisan and the small scale industrial rec come in.
Just from my own perspective, artisan manufacturing, where does the line between that get drawn between somebody who does a little bit of woodworking in their home basement?
Right. So in this one,
It feels a little fuzzy.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is the term artisan. Well, Tim, what you're describing too could be considered an at-home business, but you could have a non-residential, an artist working out of a studio. So, for example, this could become a real situation for us, because they're one of the properties that sold after in the village center, actually the property right at the intersection of 140 and 123. The people who bought those 2 homes, they're artists, and they would like to open up an art studio, educational facility. What they described to me, they also would be looking at fabrication of art. And so, and it could include, small scale fabrication and welding. I'm not sure that our current bylaw allows it. I don't think there's a threshold like what we have up above in the definition of artisan food and beverage. But I think you have to look at the existing, the proposed use in the terms of artisan manufacturing to determine, does it fall under that?
Okay. And I noticed that in the top table, there was a specific carve out for administrative related to life science. And then I assume there's a manufacturing life science further down.
There is.
That way that life science that wants a satellite office only doesn't get lumped into only needing to be an industrial, correct?
Correct. So we did add this use of manufacturing, assembly, compounding, packaging, and distribution for companies principally engaged in life sciences would be allowed as of right in industrial and by special permit in commercial. Of course, with a special permit for any building over 10,000 square feet. So, but that encapsulates the various types of activities that life science companies like pharmaceutical companies would do.
Okay. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Julie and Paul. Is there anything further that you wanted to go over with this proposed
No.
article?
I didn't have anything else, but definitely, take feedback from the board if there's anything that, you feel like needs a tweak or looks out of place, love to hear thoughts or comments if you have any.
It looks good to me. Do we need to, at some point, take a vote before we bring this to town meeting for approval?
Yeah, I would, well, that's a great point, and this would just be getting your vote to allow us to submit it for a warrant article. But we also have one other table too, but yeah, ultimately, whether we do it tonight or the next meeting, we have until March 7th to submit warrant articles. So if you need more time, but we can, if you'd like, show you that other table. And I'm going to really have Julie do this. She made me very happy with the changes. I was like, oh, wow, these are great. So this is the dimensions table. Julie, you want to take it away?
Sure. So this is the second item we discussed in the meeting, and it's the dimension table. So one of the things we talked about when we were discussing it is really this very unique to Norton aspect of the table where we start to outline how many units per building. Which, after a lot of conversation and Alan doing some math, we're like, wow, this is really, really off. And originally it was drafted where we started to add, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 units per building. And I was like, no, this is getting like too much. Like, maybe we should just simplify it and say, okay, if you've got a single family dwelling, okay, check the box there. If you got 2 units in a building, okay, that's good. But as soon as you get to 3, it's just 3 or more across the board. It doesn't matter how high up you get in the number of units, because it really starts getting, what's the differential? How are we going to lay these dimensions out? So originally, as drafted, Paul had kind of added a lot of these kind of, additional, 5, 6, 7. And, we talked about it and said, that's just, this is an oddity in and of itself. So let's figure out a way to simplify it, to really say, okay, let's make the dimensions what we really feel like they should be, and not worry about differentiating between one additional unit in said development. So we shrunk it down. We tried to simplify it a little bit. And then, Alan and I and David, who was on the call, along with Paul and Brian, started to look really more at the dimensional elements and wanted to propose ideas, obviously, to this group of where we felt like the dimensions were really, should be kind of right-sized, instead of, looking at it in terms of acres, really start to look at it like, okay, where would we want to see some more dense development, because I think originally how it was written, it really looked like, okay, you'd have like 3 separate structures on X amount of space, where really the dimensional table should be like, okay, you want to build a duplex here, or you want to build a row of townhouses here. So we were trying to right size it in the proposed changes. Is that good overview, Paul?
Yeah, very.
So you'll see kind of, what we highlighted in yellow, and what's underlined really are the changes. So look for, where the yellow is and that's underlined. Those are the changes that we decided to bring forth to the planning board.
Yeah, there's
and this is the VCC zone, village core.
Village commercial, not village center core, but village commercial.
Okay.
And there's also one. So we also added, made recommendations to reduce the frontage from 120 to 75 in village commercial, and then also recommended adding a footnote, actually copying the same footnote that was in Village Center Core for building lot coverage, which is currently 50%, but that footnote reads that you could go higher, but you need to get a special permit by the planning board if you wanted to increase the building lot coverage in village commercial only.
Right, and that's after we kind of started to take a look at some of the sizes of the parcels that are in that zone and kind of, digesting that and thinking they're really smaller sized parcels. When we started to think about, I think Alan had a really good kind of thought in that, we might have to combine 2 or 3 parcels just to get the frontage that might be needed. Just because you're talking about, kind of much smaller parcels that are currently, in that zone. So that's when we started to, think about tweaking that number a little bit.
And it also has to be economically feasible for the number of units, for the size of the land. You're not going to get any redevelopment if you have these massive land requirements. If you can't get the density, it's not going to happen, in my opinion. The other thing with the 3 units or more too, we also considered at that threshold, you become a commercial building. So there's different implications with the 3 or more that doesn't apply to the single family or the 2 units per building.
So I'm surprised you didn't take the same approach with the Village Center Core for the same reasons. To allow more density without having to go before the planning board and.
Yeah, that footnote is on that one, Kevin. That 75%. That footnote is on that one, where you could go higher.
You're saying it was already there?
Yeah, it was already there. Yeah, that's currently how it reads. It has that 75% with the 2 footnote. That's already in there. That's existing.
Yeah, you all added that when we went through Village Center Core.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that was the same discussion to promote density.
Yeah, I think we had a discussion of if we were going too far then.
Correct. We did.
So
we had to get Julie to back off a little bit.
I know, you guys might not want me on this subcommittee.
No, I came out very cautiously on this, so I'm glad it balanced out.
Yeah, so you're basically carrying over, I don't know, a lot of the same logic that we have in VCC to village commercial, kind of. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
right, Kevin. Yep.
And village commercial isn't a huge zone either. I don't know how many acres it covers, but it's in, it's limited to that corridor on 123, and then there's a very small section, I believe, over here near my house on Dean Street. There's a very small section, I believe.
Yeah.
And South Worcester. I can't think of the other section that village commercial covers.
Is there some on John Scott Boulevard, maybe?
I can pull up a zoning map. It is well, let me pull it up.
So my only thought is this is good. Just try to keep them. Don't go too far where the intent. You have unintended consequences where you have somebody who wants to, develop a property, and these changes have made it more restrictive, and more difficult, and they have to come before the planning board because it's outside of this vision, if you would, as far as what might want to, develop in those lots. You know what I mean? But, the bottom line is we're trying to make it easier for developers to avoid having to go before the planning board, right, and gain approval. They can just go to the building commissioner and get approval to construct if they're, within the zone requirements in our usage table.
Well, Kevin, I'm not, in terms of these changes for village commercial, I don't think it takes away any of your right to review. We're not, you would still need a special permit if a duplex or higher comes in. We didn't change that in the use table, so you would still have to apply for a special permit if you were doing 2 units or more in village commercial. I think who would probably see fewer cases will be the ZBA. But you're right, though. We are trying to create more compact development. And you can see in where the pink is, that's village commercial. So it's primarily.
Paul, we can't see
They're
it.
not showing
We
it.
just see the dimension table.
Okay, let me go back and do that.
I guess the question I always ask is why, right? Like, who's going to benefit from the changes and what's the purpose behind it? And so, it sounds like there's a good rationale.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I hope that the tweaks to the dimension are making it more realistic for some parcels, especially kind of reducing the frontage. And cutting that back a little bit, because I think in some of these zones, the frontage is pretty limited. So I think that was my rationale in thinking about kind of pulling that back to hopefully make some of these smaller parcels have some potential new opportunities.
As you all know, it's really up to the town meeting to approve these recommended changes. So as long as you have the answers to potential questions that might come up.
Hey, Kevin, Julie's going to do a great job explaining.
Oh yeah,
Right.
Nope, that's Tim's job.
I was going to say I'm going to have to bring her up.
Absolutely.
Hey, we did tag team a little bit at the last town meeting, Tim.
We did, but it was unofficial-ish.
It was unofficial. That's true.
But again, you can see that the village commercial is primarily along the two main corridors, and like Alan said, there's a small piece down. Around
That's South Worcester, Dean,
South Worcester,
area, Barrows area. That's right at the train, at the Barrowsville Station area.
Yeah. And the other thing, I know when David was on, he made a great point too, that that table, the way it's written, is so convoluted. It's just, I think we're simplifying it. For me, I think I would we know, Kevin, you're right. I mean, you have to make recommendations that are approvable. Personally, I would like to see us do away with, just put minimum lot sizes for each zoning district, regardless of how many units you put on it. That's a really unusual thing to do. And, if you still have just a minimum lot size, you're still accomplishing the same goals. But I'll stop sharing that. Would you like any of the tables back up?
I'm good.
Okay.
I don't know about anybody else, but I've learned to always trust the subcommittees because you're the ones that have put all of the time and effort and research into it. So as long as you can explain it to the town meeting, then I'm good.
Now that's always half the battle, Kevin. We talked about that in the subcommittee meeting too, and what's the story, what's the benefit, those type of things. Because you're right, and I have to say, we've come a long way, from some of the missteps we've had at town meeting, and I'm, really proud to be on this board and how we've taken those missteps and really turned them into lessons learned, and how early we're talking about these things and having the subcommittees and being, very prepared and ready to go to town meeting and feeling that we're all on the same page when we do that as a board. So, we've come a really long way. Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. When Paul's like, oh, we really don't have to worry about it till March, that's great that we're that far ahead of the game and we're willing to put the time in early. So, and I hope that comes off as, we continue to go to town meeting and put up a good presentation.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the storylines will be, this is the first part, the first actions of implementing the master plan. It's a small step, but these are steps that help implement the bigger steps that the plan calls for changes to our bylaw in terms of, attracting, promoting economic development. And then, we also have to go forward with some changes for, promoting different types of housing that the plan calls for. Of course, our next conversation will be along those lines, but mandated by the state. So, but I think these are productive things. I mean, it's important too, I think, with village commercial that many of the parcels aren't immediately adjacent to neighborhoods. So I think that's a palatable aspect of it too, and it's still fairly small scale, but it's not right in the middle of a neighborhood or anything like that. So hopefully these will be considered as positive changes.
Unfortunately, I think we should be bringing something to every town meeting for the next 10 years to update this bylaw. And I even think after 10 years, we would have work to do. But we can't bring so much at a time where it's too much to digest. It has to be in small pieces, small increments, digestible, explainable, with a purpose behind it. And
Rome wasn't built in a day.
correct.
Right.
Okay, so do we want to take any action on this recommendation? We want to go through the next items before we do?
I would say the next item really has nothing to do with this. And I certainly want to keep making that clear as we present this next item that, this is a mandate from the
It still ties into town meeting, right?
It will.
So
not this one.
So it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the next topic won't go to town meeting.
Several years.
Maybe in a
Couple
year.
Years.
Yeah.
A year or two.
Okay. So, okay. So I'm setting that aside for a moment here. Does the board want to take action on these recommendations? Do we want to digest a little bit and take action at our next meeting?
Julie, would you benefit from any more time between you and Alan and Paul?
No, I mean, we're good. If you guys are good, we're good. I mean, I think we had a really good, beneficial, discussion, and I don't see Alan or I or even David revisiting it. That we all agreed to the changes that Paul showed and we presented. So unless there were comments from the board, or you guys were uncomfortable with something, or there was something that you would like some more time to digest and then ask questions, and we'd be totally up for that. But we don't have another subcommittee meeting unless we were provided feedback that we needed to do research on or something like that.
And we assumed if we were so out of bounds with something that it would have been caught already, would have brought it up. Somebody would have already brought it up tonight.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board recommend the zoning bylaw changes as presented to town meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin, for the motion and Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, I will go through the members for a vote. Starting with Wayne, you're up.
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Julie, Kevin, and Steve, you keep moving around on my Zoom meeting, so I apologize if I keep going in a different order than you're expecting. Okay.
Did everyone just see Paul smile?
Yes.
I like progress.
We made Paul happy.
And now we're going to bring it right back down again.
Exactly. Let's go to the next topic.
Paul, if you want to give us a primer on this discussion and any action that we need to take on it at this point.
Yeah, there's no action on it, but I was just trying to think of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What's the cover of the book? Stay calm. Is it Stay Calm? Anyway,
Keep calm and carry on or something.
yeah, this is all right. I'm going to go through this. I presented this 2 weeks ago to the select board, which was actually is a requirement by the Commonwealth that we do that this year. There's a few things that we have to accomplish this year, but the Commonwealth is requiring all towns that are with what are considered Mbta communities, which we are one, to go ahead and adopt within a time frame new regulations that allow for multifamily as of right, so no special permit, for an area to encompass at least 50 acres. This was something that they're requiring because they want to address the housing crisis in town, in the state. And even just as an example, we're still seeing, even in the fall and the beginning of winter, we're still seeing homes that sold in Norton above their listing price. And I think the average price now in Norton for a single family home is over $350,000. And that's an issue all throughout the state. And so they are trying to accomplish two things with this legislation, which was to try to promote more supply, more smaller housing, more family-friendly housing. That's a big one too. And also promote ridership on the T. So that's the tie-in, and you can see on this map that we're considered an MBTA adjacent community because of our proximity to the commuter rail stations. We are right here, but because the T stops in Mansfield and Attleboro. So, and
possibly a future one in Taunton soon.
Yeah, well, right. Yep. Let's not forget South Coast Rail. And of course, Julie's going to make Pawtucket happen. So again, this is important because they are wanting requirements to allow them to multifamily to be allowed as of right. And so we would not be able to issue a special permit. It must be at least 50, this district must be at least 50 acres in size, with a minimum of 15 units per acre gross, which gross is the key word. If it were net, it'd be a very dense development, but at least with gross, you can subtract out open space, parking, things like that. So that number is not as high as it might initially appear. We also have to ensure that whatever this looks like, it cannot have any age restrictions or limits to the number of bedrooms, sizes, number of occupants. What's happening a lot around urban areas, especially around Boston with new development, you see those high rises going in. A lot of them are one bedroom units, which, they're building for their market, and a lot of their market in the metro area is, efficiencies, one bedroom, maybe two bedrooms, but you're not seeing 3 and 4 bedrooms coming in. So the state wants to try for us to address that. There's a couple more requirements. Based on the 50 acres and 15 units an acre, we are to at least be able to accommodate, that doesn't mean have to have built, but accommodate 750 units over some period of time. But it's just a potential. It doesn't mean that we have to go out and start tearing buildings down or find vacant land. In fact, it's actually the opposite. As far as location, based on our situation, because we don't have a T-stop, we have to be able to put this district in a location but within reasonable distance to a transit station. But also, they made it clear they would like to see it in an area that already has concentrated development. So, and with that appropriate infrastructure in place to help accommodate the growth. I mean, again, 15 units an acre. We really need to be thinking about where the sewer lines are or will be, and align this new district with existing or future infrastructure or sewer, because a development of that size on septic is going to be a big challenge. And it's also possible we could do this as a new base zoning district or as an overlay district. Now, you remember the marijuana overlay district. We could do something similar. as I've been looking into this, I would be leaning toward doing an overlay district. Again, we're still ways away from getting there, and obviously this board will have a lot to say about that. But I think there are benefits if we do it as an overlay. So timeframes. So they've laid out a series of things that we have to accomplish. And so just to get the spoiler alert out there, and for Norton, because we are an MBTA adjacent, we have to have our new zoning language and having it mapped by the end of 2024. So that gives us some time. So in the meantime, one of the things we have to do is we have to complete what they call the MBTA Community Information Form. And it's primarily letting them know we know we have to do this, and that our select board has met and we've presented this to them. So we met 2 weeks ago. I'm waiting for them to approve the minutes, and once the minutes are approved, I've completed 95% of the form, and we will get that off, and we will be considered certified through 2022, and we won't be subject to their penalties, which you'll find out are pretty severe. And through the end of March, the Department of Housing and Community Development is accepting questions and comments on the guidelines. I've already submitted about half a dozen comments to them, ranging from what happens if we get so much development that it drops us below the 10% threshold, to questions like here. You can see at the end, after we adopt it, and it has to go to town meeting. After it's adopted, we have to submit it to the Commonwealth. Well, how does that align with our requirement that we have to submit it to the Attorney General? Because the Attorney General also gets 90 days. And as you know, they are now taking a lot more than 90 days to review this. So there's a series of questions. And if you want, you certainly are welcome to go to, I can send you the link and you could submit questions as well. And then,
Paul, is one of those comments you've made, why are the requirements the same for MBTA and MBTA adjacent?
I did not ask that.
Okay.
I did not ask that question.
Can I jump in for
I did
1
ask
second?
them, though. I did ask them, if we're developing all of this, is the T actually going to add parking at these commuter rail stations? Because people can't, well, I guess they can find parking now, but before COVID.
Not in Mansfield.
Not in Mansfield.
I used to park at a private lot in Mansfield.
Owned
I
by
was
the
lucky
town of
to-
Mansfield.
No, I found a
No?
condo that rented out like 6 spots.
Wow.
Oh, well,
If I could jump in for 1 second, Paul, before you go any further with regards to questions. So this was brought up with the Serpent meeting last week, the first one of the year.
Yeah.
Discussed lengthily, as you can imagine. Most towns around us that are adjacent are, it's not sitting well with a lot of them. Serpent's Lizette from Serpent, I believe, she's helped us with the, so she's also she took down every question that night that one brought ahead. And she also wanted every other town, anyone with other questions, to forward any questions to her so they could all be together from Serpent also. They seemed like they wanted to go to bat. There are several, and I can remember a few of them. There's multiple planning boards in towns around us that are going to fight this. And I've already voted not to adopt it and not to do anything with it. Just for the simple, and they're much smaller towns, several much smaller towns, and all of them considered adjacent. So obviously we're not the only ones this is affecting, but there is, like I said, going to be pushback from several towns just in Serpent's jurisdiction, never mind anybody else's. And the chairman of Serpent, and also they knew this was going to be a hot button issue, and they were, to say, frustrated with this, and coming out of nowhere with no guidance, and they it's not sitting well with anybody, basically.
No, we didn't know about it until the legislation was passed. All of a sudden, we heard that there was this requirement coming, and
And that
Mike
was
didn't know about it. I didn't know. I've talked with other planners in the region. Nobody knew about it. No, I'm not. I mean, the people I've spoken with, planning directors in other towns, didn't know about this until.
And there was a lot of talk of, okay, it's got to go out to the state reps, and where else can we trickle this up to? Because this is slightly ridiculous.
Well, but understood, and I'm gonna do what I can to keep this on the tracks and
But-
keep it
correct,
going
but maybe-
forward. And
Help with Serpent's help, they would Serpent as an entity with all the member towns probably has more of a sway or more of anything than one town having questions and having pushback. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, mine were clarification questions.
Yeah.
They were, not going, I'll let other people decide if they want to take that, but I will get my questions to Lizette so that she knows it about them. I guess we should just mention though that the penalties are, we would be ineligible for these three funding sources. MassWorks, local capital projects funds, and housing choice initiatives. I mean, it's been a while since, I don't think we've even applied for these other two, but MassWorks is where we would get funding for water and sewer projects, road projects. Housing choices, as we move forward on the housing side of things, that funding becomes available for communities to help construct, get funding for construction of housing and affordable housing. So I just want to put that out there that if we don't comply with it, that right now the legislation says we lose that funding.
They made it very hard not to comply.
That's a big stick, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very big stick. And again, I'm just taking the approach, how can we do this the best way we can? Again, I don't know what those answers are yet, but we will have time to work with, working with a consultant to put together an action plan to figure this out. I just wanted to point out by July of 2023, we must have an approved timeline and action plan. But in between now and July of 23, we will be working with somebody. At this point, we don't know, but we will work with a consultant to put this together, to put the action plan together. I've already reached out to Serpent. I've communicated with Grant King, who you remember was the project manager for the master plan. He at the time said they hadn't received much guidance either from the state about this, but they were identified as one of the funding opportunities, consulting, and Serpent would be great. They did the master plan, so they know the town. I would assume they're going to be working with a lot of other communities, so it might be a great resource. There's a couple other resources we could use. I would not, and I don't get a vote, but I would recommend against using community one-stop funding for this. We have other priorities that we would like to do to implement the master plan and I think because we have several other funding sources available, I'd rather use those funding sources to get a consultant, as this thing goes forward. But we're not going to go at it alone. We need, there's going to be an extensive amount of time I'll have to be putting in working on this and keeping with their updates to the guidance to help us figure out the, a solution that's not only compliant, but one that works for Norton. Again, we know that what they're proposing is something far more dense than anything we have in Norton. And we need to, if these ultimately are the regulations, we have to do it in a way that's the most positive and least negative. So we will be working going forward. Hopefully this week, I'll get that MBTA community information form done. I'll stay on top of working to get a consultant with us. And then the rest of this, is very, up in the air what I hope to get done in 2022, but start identifying locations for siting the district, determine working with you all. Are we doing this, is the location acceptable? Are we doing this as a base zoning district or an overlay district? And we're going to need to start working on a public engagement plan and then drafting the work plan as the state's requiring of us. How are we going to get this, the whole process of creating this district, mapping it, and then all the way to getting it to town meeting.
And just to review, Paul, this needs to be approved by town meeting in 24?
24, yes.
Okay. So I think that we should probably set up guideposts so that this feels like one of those bigger planning board articles to go before town meeting, which, for better or for worse, Paul, the town manager, has said that traditionally that's a fall town meeting.
Yeah.
Correct? So
Right, so we'd be looking at fall of 24, probably October.
Okay.
I smell another subcommittee.
Not for a while.
Not for
Not
a
for a
while.
little while, but yes, yeah. We're gonna have to figure out an approach to work with the planning board, a subcommittee, and make sure everybody's on the same page with this.
So Paul, with such a big stick, is there any carrot in this? Like, are we going to be eligible for some funding source we're not now?
Well, I think the funding, the carrot was, in the last couple of years, the state has distributed billions of dollars. That was the carrot, but this was the stick. We're already eligible for everything, so no,
Right.
It doesn't make us eligible for anything more. It just means if we don't do it, we're ineligible for some, for those 3 funding sources.
Yeah,
As
well, I
of
mean,
now,
I think your housing question is right on point. I know we kind of touched on that a little bit on the subcommittee meeting we had. Just like if that messes with our affordable housing percentage, like that's a killer.
Yeah.
It's just a killer. It's so hard to get to meet that to begin with, and then to have it just blown up. I mean, and the density alone, I mean, that's going to put additional, pressure on town infrastructure, services provided, all of that kind of stuff.
So that was a question I asked them too, which was, they require that we do an infrastructure analysis. And I thought, well, you're going to have to give us guidance on how to do that. What are the assumptions? Because if you're asking us to put 750 units a day at one time on our water system, I'm arguing that would not be a realistic assumption. And they need to be providing us with some sort of measure or calculation for us to help us determine if we have appropriate infrastructure. And then what happens if we don't?
Right.
What happens
Exactly.
if we don't have it? I mean, because what would happen is you'll deny projects. If a project comes forward now and the water department says, we don't have enough water capacity, you're going to deny it. What happens then? What happens with this? I don't know. There's a lot of things. Although, again, I think we just need to stay calm on this, because I think if we look at some, we can find 50 acres somewhere, and it might not be as big as we think. It might not be as, there may be areas of town where we could do this where, our worst concerns about this spilling into our neighborhoods can, hopefully be avoided.
Yeah, well, I mean, I personally vote for overlay for sure.
I think that's the smarter way to go, but until we've gotten there, the other thing too is if we go that route, I mean, do we really want to lose commercial zoning?
No, we can't afford to lose commercial zoning.
Yeah. And,
We have so much limited commercial and industrial zone to begin with.
right. right? But the infrastructure is there on the corridors, so.
Right. I know it's this horrible cyclical loop when you look at what's needed to ensure that this would be a success.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, when I saw this, I was pulling my hair out because I had experienced this years ago when I worked in Florida, and it's still, as much as they're trying not to make it a one size fits all, it's a one size fits all. And anytime you put minimum density requirements in, it just, you're well, like Alan pointed out, it's making, communities very angry. And there were plenty of things they should have done through their process. And I don't know how they got to their conclusions, but my job is to try to move this thing in the most positive way forward, and we're going to try that until things change.
I think they'll change eventually. I really do. Especially with the discussion that I heard the
find
other
as
night.
we're putting this thing together, we're going, this, I don't know. I'm not going to beat this, this horse, but yeah, I just don't. I look at a town like Norton and I go 15 units an acre, and other communities around here are saying the same thing. When I talk to other planners, like, this is much bigger than anything. And,
the minimum housing effect was 750. Some towns are affected by 1,500 units. They have to squeeze in. There was a math problem to figure out how many units you had to base on.
Yeah, and
750 was the bare minimum in a table.
And right there, from their perspective, they should have known this. When communities hear, oh my God, we're going to have to add, they're not going to hear we don't actually have to add 750 or 1,500. They're still going to go, oh my God, that's a huge change. I mean, even our census data, right? We grew between 2010 and 2020, we grew by less than 200 people. And now we're adding potentially 750 units. I mean, that's, our last 10 years doesn't guarantee what we're going to see in the future, but boy, that's a big, they're really pushing us along at a pace and at a scope that is.
There you go, 10x your growth. Have fun.
Yeah. But, until other people way above me tell me this is changing, I'm going to keep us compliant.
Keep checking the boxes, Paul.
There's a couple state elections between now and 2024.
Yeah, but again, like anything, we want to do it the right way. We don't want to hack it and just, because if we're going to do 15 units an acre, we need to make sure we have good design standards in there.
Hugely important. Hugely important.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, we can't just not do it. I mean, these are going to could potentially be some big buildings, and we need to make sure that we are that we're designing it in a way. I mean, they point out in one of the slides there are things you can do. I mean, that's the thing. There are designs for smaller types of development that can actually average out to 15 units, and you wouldn't realize. And that's going to be something we're going to have to really market hard and educate people that you can do row houses, you can do quads, you can do small units and be able to accommodate it. It's not a big building, but let's face it, in the market we're in, a lot of times it's the big building, right? It's the apartments. It's the, what we're seeing, the 240Bs that were built. Those are, for Norton, very big buildings. So
Paul, you guys are probably all doing this, but your professional association, Mass Association of Planning Directors, use them as an advocacy and advisory group as well, and try to get everyone discussing this as an entire group, so you're not going at it alone.
Yeah, and you would think that the state would have worked with us and with Mass Municipal Association. I mean, if they worked with Mass Municipal Association, we didn't know about it. But you're right, they didn't. It never. I'm on the board, or I'm chair of the Economic Development Committee, which I'm involved with their monthly meetings. This never came up. And it's like, state, come on, you didn't help yourself. When you're not including the most affected people, but anyway, we'll move forward with it.
I believe the
Okay.
Serpent chairman said this came out of nowhere. I believe that was what he said. So
It
I-
appears to be.
I would tend to think that the chair of Serped should have a pretty good idea of what's coming down the pipe.
You would think.
I would think. So, but yeah,
on that regards, Paul, just before I forget, there is something else coming down the pipe. I think I forwarded to you. And just real quick, the state, there's legislation out there right now that there's going to be a state solar bylaw that's going to supersede all local solar bylaws. And that seems to be very forthcoming very soon.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Did I forward you that email? I forget.
You did.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's,
Yeah, I'll forward that to everybody.
yeah, that's already in legislation. I forget when they're voting on it, but it will supersede every town's local bylaw, and they're large projects. It's sizable what they're proposing to be allowed.
And renewing the smart credits.
Correct.
so they're renewing the credits, or are they keeping the same guidelines, or because I know they can change whatever they want to focus on with that program. Is it still the same thing?
Not sure.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look through it all, but I'm sending this to you all right now.
Fun. Okay.
So one more thing, Tim, real quick, just thinking about like if this solar thing comes up. I mean, this is going to be stuff that I know to go back to town meeting and communication plan and public outreach. Like when these things come on down from on high, how we communicate that it was not the 7 of us, 5 of us, 6 of us who made these choices is going to be key, because obviously we're the ones who are going to have to go through the hearings, the comments, those type of things. So Tim, you do a great job communicating a lot of that already, on behalf of the board, but, just to say it out loud, I guess is that's going to be a challenge for us. I'll just put it that way.
Yes, it will, in a number of respects. Peter, you've had your virtual hand up. Is there something you wanted to say?
Yes, I've been to Mansfield train station. What I see a lot of cars parking, and I take the Mansfield train station by bus.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. And
Well, excellent point by Peter. Paul, to your question about are they increasing parking, are they increasing transit access to these train stations as part of this? Because that's exactly a great point that Peter just made, is that if GATRA is not going to get more funding to either increase frequency, increase their service lines to these train stations, you need some type of transit element that has to be incorporated as well. So I don't know if that's a question Serpent's thinking or not, but Peter makes a great point in the fact that the transit connection has to be strengthened.
Well, and that line was canceled. The line to 140, now it's their GATRA Go, which I think.
GATRA Go, yes. Yes, I realize that a lot of times they got good service.
Right. So are they going to pony up and invest more?
Right, exactly.
I mean, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of units near these stations. So what's the T going to do? What's GATRA and all these other regional providers going to do to provide service there?
Well, exactly, and it's more the regional providers in Mbta in a lot of our communities, or the Serpent communities. Like, we rely on those regional providers to provide some type of transit access.
Right.
But now, I'm getting in my work high horse. But,
it's
a good question.
I'm sure that they thought through.
Right.
And I'm not knocking the state people. I don't know if this came out of just, legislation. I mean, obviously it did, but, but did they think this all through? I mean, these impacts could be huge.
Well, and that's where the carrot comes in a little bit. Like, okay, you're going to get enhanced transit providers or service or whatever, but.
Maybe I should go submit a comment that my comment has been delayed for signal problems and see what happens. No?
I would do it.
I dare you to do it.
Do it, Tim.
Okay. So Paul, thank you for putting this on your long-term planning radar, and we'll continue to move forward, and hopefully there's some updates to this in the coming months.
Yeah.
To make it more palatable. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to raise in terms of updates with the board?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you, Kevin, for the motion and Alan for the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will start with Wayne.
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.